Well, welcome to the GTM Generalist, Jack. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm stoked.
Yeah, man. Well, you and I have known each other for a handful of years and wanted to get you on because I think your story is so inspiring, not from just being a coworker of yours, but also just like a peer in space. If I didn't know you, just to see how you've gone from loop returns as a BDR to a marketing development associate, and then you jumped into status as like the first growth hire, and then now you're head of growth at Two Boxes. And I'm sure we'll get into like all of those companies and what they do, but I would love to start where you essentially are in the mindset of like, okay, I'm at Loop, I'm an MDA, marketing development associate. I'm helping with inbound, and now I'm just gonna like take this plunge into a completely new startup to be the first growth hire. Like, what was going through your mind as you were looking at making that decision?
Yeah. The transition from Loop to Status was interesting. As a lot of the Status guys, and they were all early employees at Loop. Really foundational, great culture people. Excellent product vision. They were steering a lot of the strategy. And so, when Dust and Joe and Jesse and Chris and Laren even, had left Loop. I think it left a lot of people looking around going, what's going on? This is interesting. They're all left rather quickly together, and either the business is in trouble here, which definitely was not the case. Because Luke has obviously continued to absolutely crush, or they're on something really dope. And I know you had Joe on here a week or two ago, and when I was at Loop, Joe was doing all of the product marketing, all the enablement, all the like feature sessions for sales teams. And I just was very drawn in by his ability to sell. He's one of these people who would sell ice Eskimos. And Dust, as you know, like his background, he's an exceptional product designer, great eye for design. Jesse and Chris are obviously very, very strong in kind of the development side of things. And so when they left, I was, very, very nosy, I would say, to try and figure out what's going on. And I built a little bit of a relationship with Joe, and eventually got to the point where kind of the stars aligned. It was for a bit of a move, a change. And Joe said, look, we're looking for someone to help with demand gen and growth. Would you be interested? You're going to be the first hire, like bear with us. It's going to be maybe a bumpy ride to begin with, but you get kind of full ownership of the space. And I said, yeah, why not? The product was exceptional. When I was in school, I had an idea. It was called Fits. And the idea, kind of the concept behind Fits was it was going to be a sizing engine for ecom. It was going to function similarly to Honey, right? It's going to be accessible across the browser, across your search journey as a customer. But in the way it would differentiate is we weren't going to leverage, AI, or at the time AR was huge, right? We're going to scan your body. We weren't going to do that. We're going to take what already exists in your closet, what you love, the things that fit you best, and we're essentially going to build a large data map and start mapping between people, right? So like Drew, you might have a shirt from, I don't know, maybe True Classic you absolutely love. It's a medium, it fits you perfectly, it's like good around the arms, around the chest, you're the man in this shirt. And I've got a similar shirt, but it's not from True Classic. Maybe it's I don't know. It's from Built Basics. Okay. And we see across our model, my shirt and your shirt, we have other items in our closet that may also fit. And so now I know Drew's closet probably fit me. My closet will likely fit Drew because we've got similarities. And so I was talking to Joe about this, and I got really obsessed about the idea of status. Right? Follow your clicks and your carts and save everything about you on site. And it was this really just unique way, or novel way of driving the on-site personalization. And so that's what drew me into status. Long story short, it was first and foremost the team, just a bunch of killers. And, not to be missed is obviously an exceptional product. So,
Yeah. That's I think that's a dream of everyone, right? Like, is to be able to have a great team that you just know are killers, which you had the ability to see that when working at Loop with everybody. And then, I mean, the fact that the product spoke to like what you initially had like a passion or an interest in, I think is hard to find. I think so many marketers, we probably just want to get our feet wet and just try to find something. And it might not be a product that we enjoy or we would use ourselves. So the fact that you found that, it's kind of kind of like a match made in heaven. So that's cool, man. Well, when you left Loop to go do that, like what were some of the first things that you had in like the first 30 days? Like, I mean, you were creating a new category. And for those that hadn't seen like I had my conversation with Joe and Status, like quickly like break down what Status was. And then like, yeah, what was like the first like 30 days in terms of like, what am I going to do? Where do I start?
Yeah, for sure. So status, Joe's obviously gonna do a better job pitching it, but I'll give him my best. So Joe's listening, and I do this drawing, and he's gonna drop a comment, call me out. But really, what we did was leverage sign-in to personalize everything on site. And so, the general hypothesis was that cookies in the era of data privacy would become less and less effective. And as you know, as a marketer, cookies drive a lot of personalization on site and follow you kind of off site as well. And so we believe you could personalize every touch point on site from login. So everything behind sign in. And so once we have you signed in, we have, save your clicks in your cards. It's really like a supercharged wish list is probably the easiest way to put it. But on top of, just a wish list itself, we're going to bring you back to everything you've previously seen, all the items we believe you love. So that when you land on a brand's homepage, we were working with like Steve Madden and Fenty Beauty and True Classic, among others. And it just ensured that when you came back to the site, it's going to take multiple visits before you purchase. You're picking up where you left off. It ended up being like a breadcrumb that gets you one step closer to the cart. And I think, not to get all philosophical, but as marketers, specifically on the growth side, like it's all about breadcrumbs. We're never going to be able to bring a prospect that's cold to a demo without a breadcrumb and multiple breadcrumbs along the way. And it's like every tactic you deploy is centered around a breadcrumb. And so just getting, these folks to the next step, you want to go through funnel stages, you call it, your lead to MQL to SQL to SQO or whatever else. But really at the end of the day, to simplify it down is we're putting out our breadcrumbs, right? And just to kind of get back to the second portion of your question I do about the first 30 days, Joe said to me, he's like, here's the plan. We're going to book a demo a day, every day. And as long as we do that, we'll hit target. And I can tell you the first 90 days, we were not booking a demo a day every day. Those first 90 days were challenging. Joe and I were really in the trenches together trying to figure out how we were going to grow. One of the things we didn't have was signal. And, we can get into this a little bit as well, but the beautiful part about Two Boxes right now is we've got enough traction in the market when I joined that I can go back and look at all of our deals. And what we look for is original stories. Like I want to know, where did you hear about us initially? And so as I build plans, it's like, where are our watering holes? You don't want to just spread yourself thin in a resource constrained environment, right? As a single marketer, a single growth guy, you need to be mindful about where your prospects are hanging out. So of course, we want to be thinking, getting inside their heads, what makes them pick. But at the end of the day, I want to be where you're hanging out. Like I want to be at that watering hole. And so Joe and I together are trying to figure out where were our watering holes. And so it ended up being a couple of places. One, our agency partners. We worked very, very closely with several agencies, and they really believed in the product. And as a result, were great champions for us. Two, we leaned into content. Right. And so because we're kind of creating a category, and obviously Shopify now has rolled out new customer accounts. You see that with other folks like Revo, which is excellent. We had to educate the market. And so a lot of that was about being present on LinkedIn, building an audience, ensuring we're creating unique content, having a unique voice in market, really leaning into case studies, right? Social proof. So those first 90 days were centered around just trying to figure out, where are we going to be investing? Where are our watering holes? And so it was a blast, but needless to say, the first 90 days were not the easiest 90 days.
Wow, what a it's such a simple goal of get a demo a day, but also like wow,
Yeah.
that feels very very like a pressure because like to your point, like you didn't have any watering holes, you had to go figure those out, and so I would imagine that in content, right? Like, so if you look at the partnerships and then you look at content, like if those are two of the areas where you wanted to like first initiate your strategy, your plan, that stuff doesn't like happen automatically, right? Like the agencies take a little bit of time unless you like fully get in on like the story and the positioning, and you guys are building that. So was there anything that kind of like tipped you in, hey, this is actually starting to work now? Like how many days in was it where you're like, okay, we're starting to see getting closer to demo a day goal. Maybe that never happened, but I'm curious, like, when did you start to see some of that traction take place by investing in agencies and content?
Yeah. So it obviously wasn't immediate. And we were constantly testing and constantly refining. Like I think even up until the point when, we kind of shut the business down, we were still learning and growing. And there was signal that we probably hadn't picked up on. There was areas, of course, we want to continue investing in. Like we were still very early days. But I would say probably within 6 months, we start to see a little bit more movement. Within 9 months, certainly more confident in kind of the strategy and the playbook. Like you mentioned enabling agencies. I think, I often get questions from partners about enabling agencies. Like, how do you break into an agency? Agency Y is working with one of our competitors. They obviously see the value in what we do, but there's such a strong partnership there. How do we get in front of those folks? And I think the easiest way to do it is just to find a mutual brand, right? Like on the partnerships front, the best thing you can be doing is find a mutual story, take great results and bring it, to the agency and say, hey, look, here's what we've been able to accomplish together with our mutual client. And here's why it's going to be a benefit for you to roll this out to more of your clients, right? And like how we'll be an excellent partner. And so I think the first step is not going and preaching your solution. The first step is finding the great case study. And, of course, like that takes time. One of the conversations we're having now at Two Boxes is as we continue to move up market, how can we be strategic about it? And so if you look at our basic case studies today, you'll see we're starting to make incremental jumps in kind of the size of brands that 3PLs we're servicing. And of course, the goal essentially is continue to take those steps, right? So we just recently published a case study on Tacovas. Tacovas is a beloved, phenomenal brand, great team, large logo on the Shopify ecosystem. And now, selfishly, internally, we're thinking, okay, now we've got a case study in the market about Tacovas. How do we go find the next Tacovas, the lookalikes, and bridge up in the ecosystem? And then you run the same play again. You get someone in seed for maybe 90 days or 6 months, right? Get a really strong story you can tell and market together and produce another case study. And then you use that to kind of leverage up. And so we were doing the same thing with our agency partners. And of course, for our tech partners as well. When it was at Status, we integrated with Loop. And of course, we had a great relationship with Loop. So maybe not the best example, but I'll just talk really about it because I know the team well. Before kind of really taking integration to market, we have to show great results. It's like, here's the use case. We have to do enablement. And so you have to get people excited, and all of that is just education, right? Mm-hmm. So like find that great logo, the person that we're all excited about, produce the great results, create a great story, and then take it to market. And that's really kind of how you start to incrementally grow.
I feel like there's another conversation we can have about just like enabling agencies, because that's where my heart's at with what I did at Loop and at Submarine, and now even consulting with agencies. So where I want to kind of jump in is like, you've been talking about case studies and content, and so that leads me to a question of like, when you joined Status, were there certain skill sets or certain things that were on your plate? Like, man, I've never really had any reps at this. Like, I need to figure out how to either outsource it or do it internally by myself. You're talking a lot about stories. So like, yeah, did you have experience like creating the case studies and doing that? Or did you have to like lean on other people or other tools?
So yes and yes. Like, yeah, there was certainly experience, and yeah, I had to lean on people. I don't know everything, right? Like if you meet anybody in life that doesn't know everything, they're clearly full of shit. And even in the role I'm in today, right? Like I'm learning every day. So maybe if I just tell a bit of a story. So as a BDR, right, at Loop, and I think starting as a BDR is both a wonderful thing and a frustrating thing for the right person, right? And so for me, it was a little frustrating. It really wasn't the path I wanted to, focus on. I did want to go the sales route. I did want to get into a marketing org. But what being a BDR did for me, and what I'm incredibly grateful for now in hindsight, is you get into the mind of the prospect and the customer, right? You really get to understand how they think, what copy is resonating with them, what data points are resonating with them. And you're really a weapon within the business then. When you can figure out what's bringing new accounts in, sales is not even an easy job, right? There's no sales rep in the world that's an easy job. Great salespeople crush for a reason, but it is not easy to bring these accounts in, right? And so like, it's the right word in the right order to the right person at the right time, right? And so like as a BDR, you learn that craft inside and out, which I think has helped me a ton in my marketing, right, and kind of growth journey. And so then when I jumped into the marketing org at Loop, I continued to enable the BDR team while also supporting demand gen. And then when I jumped to status, right, I had seen kind of content development at Loop and, understood process in that sense, but we didn't have an engine, right? And so like in a resource constrained environment, we're in the same spot right now with two bots is we have to be mindful about where we allocate our time, right? And our energy. And we can boil the ocean, or we can get back to, kind of first principles. And one of the things we used to talk about in status was, can this live on a slide first? So if we produce a case study, can we just ensure that it lives on a slide, and is there utility in having it on a slide? Whereas if we have it, we focus on kind of making out long form content for the website, higher time sink, higher effort, more review process required. There's certainly benefits to that, right? And you get to a stage in an organization where that makes a ton of sense, but just start with why. If you're an early stage marketer and you're looking at case studies and content, you don't need to have, 1,000 words, 1,200 words, 1,500 words. Just give me the most important data points first. And like, oftentimes that's just the slide. And so, kind of again, going back to your question about, did you have the skill set and how are you learning? It's constantly evolving, right? And so I would always say, just start with the slide, first principles, keep it simple. How effectively can you communicate in as few of words as possible? And if you
Yeah.
can do that well, there's really no stopping strong marketers. I think, one of the things we talk about right now internally, and probably small marketing teams fight with or have to deal with, is team members will come and they're like, we should do, right? And so you get people across the business who are always saying, we should do. I'm like, great, we should do it, but when, right? And is that thing that we should do more important than what's already on plate today? And so like, can take the direction or the question a different direction now, Drew, but like small marketing teams need to focus on the most important thing, find the breadcrumbs, drive incremental growth, and just be extremely cautious about where time and resources are allocated. Learn to say no at the end of the day, because the we should do can be very overwhelming.
Yeah. Wow. Like that's so good, man. I think there's a bunch of great things you shared in there that I feel like I've seen you do. And also, to your point, if you start small, it allows for you to see like what is actually going to resonate. Because if instead of wasting all your time creating this massive case study, like you don't even know if like that's going to resonate with the people you're talking to. So if you can start with the one slide that really forces you to think about what's the story I'm trying to communicate, and like, can I see the response that I'm looking for, and then say, yeah, I'm going to invest more. And so as a marketer of one or a small team, yeah, you have to make those small little incremental steps to something bigger.
Yep.
I love that, dude. That's so good. Makes me think about this, the role of enablement as itself, right? When you're working with a sales team. And I don't know, does Two Boxes have a sales team, or is it
Yeah,
product
we
led?
do.
Okay.
Yeah, we do.
So like what's it been like creating enablement materials for other parts of the organization, like the sales team? Because like when you're at status, like you weren't creating content for any sales team, but when you're at Loop,
Yeah.
you did. So like what's going from like creating it for a sales team to then going and just doing it for yourself, and then going back to creating it for a sales team? What's some of like the lessons you've taken from that, in going
Yeah.
both sides?
Yeah. So I'm a systems thinker on templates first. If we can't templatize something at our size, it's probably not worth investing in. Now there's of course edge cases to that, right? And reasons to break that rule, but I want to templatize and create systems. And so for a sales team like we have today, again, just kind of going back with Tacova's example, we wrote a long form case study for Tacova's. It's a great story. They've been a great partner for us. But for our sales team, would they need our snippets to drop in emails to prospects and ops? And then the other thing they need is a slide to be able to drop into decks. And so, that just goes back to the power of a single slide. Our team, as far as enablement goes, always expects snippets, and they always expect slides. And I think zooming outside of the tactics themselves, the most important thing with enablement is, I don't want to say redirection, but just continuing to focus on, hey, here's where to look. This is where the resources will live, and here's when they're going to live there. And so creating a rhythm around everything you do as a marketer, I think is incredibly powerful. And so on the enablement piece internally, it creates expectation, right? People just know where to look. They're able to self-serve themselves, which is great. But in market as well, and like you should have a clear cadence for when you're engaging on social. I really do not like committing to things that I cannot, do consistently. And so I would much rather post on LinkedIn Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every week, for the entire year. And hey, this week we're going to post on Monday. Next week, maybe we'll post on Tuesday. It could be at 2:30. It could be at 4:30. I think the way you win, and we're probably geared as human beings, is just to kind of create structure. Here's where to look, and here's when to look for it, right? And so I want our prospects thinking that way. I want them thinking, oh, we're going to hear from two boxes. Or we're going to hear from Kyle. I'm going to hear from Jap on LinkedIn. Or I want our team thinking, hey, we're going to have a minimum one case study per month. Here's when it's going to be coming out in the month. We're going to do one webinar per month. Here's when it's going to be coming out, in the month, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of building a rhythm. Build a rhythm, you can win.
Yeah, that's so good. I think for me, what's been challenging is figuring out how much time I need to do certain things, right? So when you're creating the system, and maybe there's some things you've never really done before, and so you're like, I think this is going to take me an hour. And it could take you longer than that, right? Or it could take you a lot less. But usually for me, I find myself, it takes me longer. And so I just like really resonate with what you're saying, because I want to do that, but I struggle. So I guess like to point the question to you, how have you managed that, right? Because to your point, you said there's things that you've never really done before. And you're saying, I'm only going to say yes to things that I can say that I can commit to, like posting 3 times a week at a certain time. So yeah, like what's your thoughts on that? The struggle of like knowing how much time you need for new things.
Yeah. Well, it sounds great in theory, like saying no often, only yes to things you can commit to. But I overcommit, like I certainly overcommit. I don't generally like to think I'm late on things, but I put more time into our content, into partner strategy, into supporting sales than I have budgeted. Right. Like that's not a knock on any of our content or the team or our partners. That's just hey, over time we'll be able to readjust and figure out, how much time is actually realistic and budget accordingly. I think everybody's going to be overly ambitious, but you don't want to burn yourself out either, right? Like if you're going to work a 60-hour week, work a 60-hour week. If you're going to work a 40-hour week, work a 40-hour week. If you're going to work a 20-hour week, work a 20-hour week. Over time, I think I've gotten better about budgeting, right? But even still, like I said, like I'm blowing through how long things are going to take. They always take longer than expected. And honestly, probably I would say 2 times as long on average. I feel like if I think something's going to take an hour, it's realistically probably going to take 2. And I throw everything on my calendar. So my day is structured on my calendar, and I 30-minute blocks. And if I drop a 30-minute block in somewhere, to work on a LinkedIn post for 30 minutes, it could be 45, it could be an hour, and now I'm getting well into the next block, right? And so have to constantly readjust and restructure. But yeah, it's I'm certainly not an expert.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like it? Do you have a personal reflection time where you're figuring out, am I improving this, or I need to change things up? Because it's one thing to like have a system and get reps. That's what usually people always say is like get reps, and to take the Mr. Beast advice of like just improve 1% every single day on every single video, improve 1%, change thing. I think that's great in theory too, but like sometimes you just don't know what needs to be improved because it's something that's new. And so you need enough reps to kind of figure out like, okay, like now I'm starting to see like this is where I need to improve, or maybe you don't, because I think there's the other element of this when you're trying to learn something or do something new is you might not have the necessary time to go learn and like consume the content. I mean, perfect example, talking to direct to consumer brands, the e-commerce managers and stuff like that, they are overwhelmed with this stuff. They just need the software or the solution, and they don't really do any like optimizations to it because it's like they just don't have the time, right? They don't have the time to go learn about it and go figure it out. Now, I'm not saying that means you can't go learn about it. I'm just saying like the average person, especially for me, I think I struggle with like, how do I balance how much I learn to improve versus like, I just continue to get reps and hopefully something sticks. Right. So Um, yeah, I don't know if any of that resonates with you at all.
No, it does big time. I think there's a few ways I'm thinking about this. So I'm definitely more reps oriented. So I am improving through process, right? And it's not a great system. I'll be honest. I can't start my week and say, hey, I'm going to focus on this and I'm going to do 1% better by the end of the week. I say I can't. I probably could, right? But I don't. I don't today. I'm improving as I'm doing things, right? Like the stage we're at right now is do. But we'll get to a point where we'll be able to kind of have forest from the trees moment and kind of lift our heads out of the weeds, take a larger view, right? And do a full retro. And so just from a rhythm standpoint, like my Friday afternoons, I tried to use for reflection, looking back in the week, what went well, what didn't go well. And I also use that time for planning for the coming week.
Mm.
Ideally, and get to a point where planning monthly, right? And so as we are getting ready to turn the quarter, I'm trying to get into the rhythm now of planning a quarter ahead. Of course, July will have greater fidelity than what we're going to do in September, right? Tactically, but at least we can start kind of setting some themes around, July, August, September. And we know from a content standpoint, we co-marketing what's committed, events, and so on and so forth. But I'm learning through doing. I'm not learning because I'm setting aside time to really kind of be, digging into things, and creating space for it. I the kind of flip side of that is my network of people hold me accountable to learning. So, I've got a great group of friends who are marketers, who are growth focused, who are far more into AI and knowledgeable on AI than I am. And they're constantly sharing new ideas and use cases. And so I am learning through them. And so I think as long as you surround yourself by people who are elevating themselves, there's always going to be that kind of, that effect. You're going to learn
Yeah,
something just through association, right? And so
yeah,
I learned reps and I learned through association to that.
I love that. And I would actually even bet that there's not a lot of people who even focus on the association part. I've worked with a lot of people who it's just like they don't really talk about their work with other friends and stuff like that. It's just kind of like, I'm done with work. And not to say that that's not a bad thing. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
if you're somebody who is in a startup and has limited resources, you do need that more than ever, especially now. So, I love that, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, so a group that comes to mind, there's 6 guys. We get coffee, on a regular basis in Columbus on a Friday morning. And then we're all in startups at various stages, some much earlier than others and others much further along. And we talk shop. How's work going? One, it's nice to kind of have a shoulder to lean on, right? When things aren't going well. But two, it's also really fun to be able to champion wins with folks who you're not working with every single day. And part of that then is learning new tactics and strategies. And some guys are marketers, others are more engineering focused on the product side of things. And so it's really just a nice way to kind of diversify your school of thought.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine too, like you said, the shoulder to lean on. There's also the times where it feels like imposter syndrome, right? Like you're doing new things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to think about the future. I was listening to a podcast on Lenny's newsletter, but he also has a podcast.
Right.
And he was interviewing I'm gonna botch his last name, I think, but Drew Houston, the co-founder or the founder and CEO of Dropbox. And this
Nice.
was a recent episode, and he was talking about, as a founder, the constant need of working in the business, but then also working on the business. And you have to be in two states at the same time. And not everyone can do that. And so he was essentially saying, like, you have to constantly learn and like look at other industries and things in the past that can inform what's going on in potentially in your market. And then at the same time, you have to like put out fires and do the work. And so I think as someone like yourself or any other go to market generalist, like you have to have that mindset because the imposter syndrome is going to eat you.
Oh, yeah, 100%. This is not popular opinion. It's maybe a bit of a hot take. I'm probably not this extreme myself. And there's more balance here, but I think there's benefit to sometimes sticking your head in the sand and just
Mm.
focusing on your sphere. Because I think if you spend too much time looking around, I think LinkedIn's a great example of this. Twitter is a great example of this. Even if you have like any industry news channel in Slack, or even within your team, it can be very easy to get distracted. And there's a lot of noise. And I think a lot of teams don't win because they don't focus on signal, they focus on noise. And I think the same can be said for individuals, right? And so sometimes it's okay to be a little naive, to be ignorant to what's going on around you, maybe not to be completely up to speed on the latest happenings with AI. AI is moving so quickly, and just as an example, but like AI is changing so quickly that if I try every single day to identify a use case, I will never deploy anything. I'll never get anything into market. I will never be able to create an incremental jump in our business at this stage. Now, that may be different if I was, operating a larger team and we were much further along. But there is certainly benefit to just sticking your head in the sand and focusing on what's most important, and what's in front of you to that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good, man. Like, because your people that you're serving, your customers, and your potential customers, chances are they're probably even way less than you are. Like, if you feel like, man, I'm barely scratching the surface, I'm keeping up with AI, chances are they're like not even a percent of where you're at. And I think what that speaks to me is like, yeah, you're limited resources. You don't have the flexibility to go and research and go see what's the latest things happening in your market. You just got to go talk to the customers and like work there and focus. So I love that advice, dude. Definitely, I would say something that is a hot take, but people don't want to admit that because it removes them from doing the hard work, which is you have to write the content, you have to talk with customers, you have to work with your sales team. Like those are sometimes can be very hard to do, right? So, yeah. So you've talked about like partner strategy. You just told me before we started, like you just did a huge roadshow tour traveling to all these different cities. So like maybe talk a little bit like what is your focus specifically? And then like what have you decided like, hey, I need to delegate this to another team, another person on the marketing team. I don't even know if you have a marketing team. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Flying solo today. We had a couple interns on the team, and unfortunately, they had other opportunities they were going to pursue. They were MBA folks at Berkeley, absolutely wonderful gals, and crushed. And so it was really privileged to get working with them for a while. But now I'm back solo, and so on the content side, I'm looking to see, can we bring people in? Can we pull an agency in? On the partnerships front, I think that's not agency or, kind of like I think you want to outsource. You want to have someone dedicated, as like partnerships all about relationships, right? If you're delegating or bringing an external, team in to support that, it's a red flag, I think, to any partner to begin with. But, I think to answer the question a different way, my North Star at Status and my North Star at Two Boxes is pipeline. There's really one number I'm accountable for, and it's pipeline. And as long as I hit my targets, it doesn't really matter how I get there. Partnerships and marketing are tactics in my mind to hit a pipeline number. And because of the size of business we're at today, I'm solely responsible for hitting that number, right? And so on a quarterly basis, as we try to quarter, this is the perfect time to be having the conversation, but we're investing in events. We have to be in market. We have to be seen in market. The business that we're in today and the industry that we're in, that we're operating in, super relationship driven. And so actually, maybe we just pause here. I don't think we even did like what is Two Boxes. So quick explain our Two Boxes, right? About this. We deploy technology like software and hardware into warehouses that optimizes the returns processing process, the experience. Right. So for brands, this means you're getting more inventory back to stock faster. They're reducing the incidence of fraud. They're detecting it early. And for our operators within 3PLs, they're moving away from papers and spreadsheets to a system detection and support in the long term. It is a huge quality of life improvement, and it is an amazing thing to watch from a systems and process standpoint. It's completely blown my mind. So I went from the front end of the Shopify stack, right? Loyalty, retention, returns, now to the warehouse. I'm probably as far back in the stack as you can get. And so it's a very, very different experience, but we're serving a lot of the same brands and obviously consumers as a result. But this end of the industry, super events and relationship driven, right? Like I need to be boots on the ground in market, talking to our prospects, talking to our customers, hearing their pains, understanding what they're trying to solve for in the next year, learning about their families, learning about what makes them tick outside of work. And as a result, we're going to be investing heavily in events. So you talked about the roadshow. I was in Toronto, Dallas, New York, Nashville, across the little over last month. And we'll be picking it back up in Columbus here next month, then going to Chicago, and we'll see where we go thereafter. Like we have to be boots in the ground. We have to be meeting our people in person. We have to be at trade shows, and we do events, right? And dinners and like all those sorts of things. Content is the other piece, right? So we'll invest in events, we'll invest in content. The reason we're going to invest in content is because we need to educate the market. So when I look at content, there's really kind of like three things you need. You need a great logo, you need great results, you need great distribution. I think the most important piece that a lot of people miss on the content front is distribution. You might have a great logo, you might have great results, right? You roll out a new case study and it sits on the website. If you're not distributing that to channels that you don't own, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. So I love partnering up on content. I love partnering up on webinars, on blog posts, on case studies. You have to find a distribution channel. And so we will continue to invest in content as long as we have strong distribution that allows us to tap into partner networks, into customer networks, into prospect networks. Really, to kind of get back to what we were talking about earlier about watering holes. Everything we do has to bring us to a watering hole, right? And so in the funnel, we drop breadcrumbs. From a strategy standpoint, everything is centered around the watering. And so, it'll be events, content, and then partners. As you know, partners is the long-term game, right? You have to invest in a relationship. You have to assume you get nothing up front and probably won't receive anything for an extended period of time. It is a high investment with potential high long-term results, right? But it is across a long time horizon. If you're just getting started and launching a growth program, like start partnerships today because the best time to grow a tree was yesterday. But understand that you're not going to, at status, we're looking at a demo a day. You're not going to get a demo a day from a partner from day one, right? Probably 6 to 9 months down the line, that's when that may start happening, as long as you invest in the relationship. And, I don't want to play the game. It's got a negative, maybe not the best connotation, but like, as long as you run your playbook correctly. And so for us, 2 boxes now, it's events, content, partners. That's where we're going to focus growth.
I love that. I love that. What you're speaking about is focusing in on like what is going to drive pipeline. And that requires you to go to the watering holes where your target customers are already at. So I guess to take a quick little step back on that, when you came into 2 boxes, was partnerships already a thing? Like, were they thinking about it? Was events already a thing? Were they thinking about it? Was content like, or were these all completely new watering holes and approaches to 2 boxes?
Yeah. So what was interesting, obviously, it's Loop, much more established, right? Like when I left the team there, all of these departments, even still today, they're growing, but very, very well established at Loop, right? There were clear playbooks, there were Notion pages, there were SOPs, there was strong networks, et cetera, et cetera. You saw it. Status starting from scratch, like literally scratch. We didn't have any playbooks. Joe and I were learning together. We're figuring it out. We're in the weeds every day. 2 boxes, somewhere in between. So when I joined the team, we had a bit of a content motion. We had a bit of a partnerships motion. And now it's just about kind of creating structure and really refining what that process looks like. I think you can do more with less, right? And so on the partnerships front, because we're resource constrained, and this is not a knock on any partner, but we have to find signal from noise, right? And where we have signal today, we need to continue investing until we don't have signal, right? And so we continue to work with the same partners. Of course, we're developing other partners along the way because, again, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. But because we're small, we're lean, and we're scrappy, find the signal, chase the signal, continue investing where you have signal until you don't anymore. And we're doing the same on the content side. We don't have to boil the ocean. We don't have to be putting out blog posts every week. We need to be present in our watering holes, and we need to make a splash when we have something to say, right? Yeah. So like, kudos to our co-founders, great presence on LinkedIn. One of the things they had said to me, and within the first 30 days, like, what should we be doing differently on our personal LinkedIn pages? And I said, nothing. Like, this is working right now. Of course, our area we can refine. We'll come back and we'll probably improve messaging and get more regular cadence and et cetera, et cetera. But we have signal here, right? Like you got hosting consistently, you've got a great audience. I am not going to touch something and potentially break something that's working when we have opportunity to go and refine other areas and kind of, generate more pipeline through kind of like refiner channels. So anyways, I'll leave it at that.
I think that's so great that you have founders that are doing that, because I mean, that's essentially why I have my consulting. I'm working with founders as the tip of the spear, because if they're able to close the enterprise bottom of the funnel deals through how they talk about the market, how they talk about the problem, and where the market's going, why can't you amplify that to social? And it's great to hear that you guys are doing that with your 2 co-founders. So then talk to me then about, with the events and the content, you have a pipeline number this quarter, right? Like when you started, was there a little bit of explanation of like education of, hey, like the things that we are going to invest in are that are going to drive us the biggest amount of pipeline opportunity, it's going to
Yeah.
take a while. So were there any like short-term win executions or strategies you had to put in place? And if so, what were those to help close business?
Yeah. Okay. So a few ways to answer this. My first, I think it was 24 days. I was less than a month in seat, and I had to plan an event, a manifest trade show, biggest trade show of the year. Um, we had a booth reserved. We didn't have a booth designed. So, that was the first order of business. Like, who's going to the show? What other co-marketing things are we doing around the show? What is the booth setup looking like? So maybe that was the small wins. I mean, you're doing first 30 days is crazy. And we
Yeah.
did a dinner with partners. I say it was crazy. It was awesome. Like, talk about hitting the ground running. There was no ramp period. In that same time, we did a webinar with Luke. And so, I'm still learning the product and I'm still learning our customers. And of course, today I'm 6 months in, I'm still learning about our positioning in market and how we're going to move up market, who our prospects are, et cetera, et cetera. You have to be always learning. Well, in that first 30 days, I did a webinar with Luke. And so we planned content and we had our co-founders involved. And so you never commit to doing a nothing webinar, but it certainly wasn't a nothing webinar. Right. And then we're doing an event, a trade show in person where we're bringing out half our team. And so that was an insane first 30 days. And so I would say, those are kind of two quick wins, but like one of the things we're after doing, and I'd say really the lesson here is be careful what you put your hand up for. We were using Salesforce for their CRM, and the data in the CRM was not great. There was very few ways to actually find signal. And I've used HubSpot in the past, and I love HubSpot because it's more intuitive, right? And I think irregardless of the tool, you just need to create cadence around the team and be very clear about, hey, we're going to capture source, for a demo being booked. We're going to capture who the persona is. We're going to be capturing, ADC throughout the kind of the sales process. And we weren't doing that. So I had no data set, Drew, to build a plan initially. So I'm doing one of these, like, hope. It was a hope and a prayer, but I knew we'd have to invest in events. I knew we'd have to continue investing in content because it worked well at Status. And if you look around the industry, like that's where people are investing, is these intimate experiences and through content and through partnerships. But now we, as of, I think 2 weeks ago, completed the full, Salesforce HubSpot migration. And now I've got a migration, CRM migration under my belt. And we're starting to capture all of the data points that we need to build stronger plans and to get more signal moving forward. So I'm super stoked, because as we turn the quarter, great time to have it done. We'll only be able to move faster as we get into Q1 of next year, which will be peak season. We'll be moving at a click that, far, far, far outpaces what we're doing this year. I'm stoked.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, like, what would you say if you can like go back and talk to Jack 3 years ago, or Jack at Loop or Jack before that? What would you tell him about what he should be focusing on and doing? Because I think there's a lot of people that are in your shoes now when you were back at Loop, or they're in your shoes now at Two Boxes.
Well, my personal advice that I'll continue to give to myself is patience. I am not a patient individual. All of my managers, all my leaders will tell you I probably push harder than I need to. Bert, who is my BDR manager at Loop, I was 4 months in seat. I'm like saying to Bert, I really want to get into marketing org. Like, I don't think I'm going to be pursuing a path for in sales. How do we make this happen? And he's like, you signed up to be a BDR. It'll happen eventually, but I need you producing for BDR. Keep doing what you're doing. And so patience has never been a strong suit. And I've always pushed for more, both for myself and for my team. And I think that's great in a growth org. You just have to be mindful about, not being abrasive, in the way that that's done. You have to be tactful. And so I think it's good to rally the team. I think it's good to push the standards. It's good to push, effort and everyone's limits, but not doing it in a way that could be potentially abrasive. So yeah, I mean, I think just personally, I would preach patience to myself. That's probably not the answer you're looking for, but you have to be patient. You have to balance patience with that go. Let's do more.
Yeah, that is an answer I want, because I feel like it is so much of like, just keep pushing and people run themselves into the ground. And so patience not only with like how things are working and progressing, but then also patience with people yourself, right? Like there are people in the organization that you work with that are pressuring you, asking you questions that might not understand marketing, salespeople or executives. And you have to have the patience to understand they're human too, and you got to educate them. It's just another opportunity to educate, share, and teach. So I love that, man. That's great feedback. I so appreciate you coming on. Where should people follow you if they want to learn more, reach out to you? Yeah, what's your plug?
Oh wow. Ping me on LinkedIn. I mean, I probably post more frequently than I need to be. I'm trying to think what the word is here. I am a LinkedIn addict, maybe. That might be a more appropriate way to say what I was going to say, but yeah. Follow me on LinkedIn, connect me on LinkedIn, open door, DM me, email me, whatever you want. I love meeting people. So LinkedIn's the place to find me.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. See you, everybody.